It's with a great pleasure that I get to announce our first keynote speaker of today, Phil Gilbert. Phil Gilbert has been working for IBM for 10 years now, and according to him, everything is a prototype. But let's have him on stage to watch his amazing keynote speech now. Please help me welcome on stage Phil Gilbert.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you so much. And I assume everybody can hear me. And I look forward to making this presentation. Let me get this shared for you all. And it should be on the screen now. Yeah. First of all, thank you all so much for taking the time. I'm really excited and to see all of you from all around the world participating in this event in this fashion is kind of crazy. It's also pretty awesome from my perspective to see this come together and overcome these obstacles. And in fact, I think, you know, maybe even make better use of them. Today alone, because of all of this technology, I started my morning in Austin, Texas. I then have now come here. I'll be in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the US in an hour, and in New York City later this afternoon. That's what this technology does. You know, when we first began our journey into design thinking at IBM, we very much created a world that looks like this. And this is the way our teams work every day. At IBM, we have about 350,000 plus employees all around the world. Our teams are, very few of our teams are co-located. And so our teams are used to working together in studios and garage spaces and agile workspaces like this, and working remotely with some of their peers or passing the work around the world. Working with what we call sponsor users, doing our field research, both virtually and in person. But of course, things have changed. And so now, like this conference, all of our design thinking and all of our design thinkers are now all virtual. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to visit with you today about our program. We actually started in 2013 to begin creating a faster moving, modern, human-centered organization. IBM has a long heritage in design. Our design program was actually founded in 1956. It's one of the first corporate design programs in the world, and it was founded by Elliot Noyes. He was the credited designer behind the IBM Selectric. Charles and Ray Eames did their best work for IBM. Paul Rand, of course, did our logo, as well as the rebus that was on the screen at the beginning of this presentation. We have a legacy in design. We wanted to move that into creating a new legacy in design thinking. And we felt like that was the key framework to be brought into IBM to help us move into this modern human-centered organization. That started in 2013, and today we have hired over 2,500 formally trained designers. We have about 20,000 client-facing user experience professionals, and today virtually all of our 350,000 people use design thinking in some form in their daily work. We reckon we have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 projects going on simultaneously, some internal facing, many employee facing, and all of our client facing work. And all of this is done with our users being our North Star and using design thinking as the framework in order to better understand those users, develop empathy with those users, and to both conceive of divergent possibilities and then convergent solutions to the problems that they face. Many folks have said that this is probably the largest scaled adoption of design thinking kind of ever done. And we've embedded it with a sustainability that I'll talk about in just a second. But what we've been doing over the last year or so is really reflecting on what we did. And to the extent, and we're still young in this journey, even at 7 years, to the extent that we have started to create a sustainable culture of design and design thinking at IBM, we started to reflect on what actually makes a human-centered organization. And we're all aware of the traditional business metrics that we use to judge companies and products. But we started thinking that there's a whole nother set of more diverse stakeholders and meaning to a real human-centered organization, that it exists to deliver better experiences, not just for its users and customers, but also for its employees and the community that it lives in. It also has to build resilience and de-risk innovation by thinking about everything being a prototype, even your in-market experiences or even your current employee experiences. As we continue to understand the human condition and the technologies that can assist the human condition, we have to also think about continuously innovating on what we do and what we deliver. And finally, it invests as much in its diverse, empowered teams as it does in its customers and clients. There's 3 primary lenses that we've used to think about how we go about creating an enterprise that adopts these characteristics. And I want to talk about these 3 with you today, and hopefully some of these will be impactful to you. The first one I'd like to talk about is how we think about scaling and why we're scaling. You know, when we started this journey, we had about 1 design thinker for every 72 employees, roughly speaking. We were a very engineering-centric organization. And over the past 7 years, we've moved that to be 1 to every 8. We actually have, this is actually the formally trained designers, the people coming out of programs like the one you're in. We now have 1 of those for every 8 employees at IBM. It's so important because even as you think about the number of designers at IBM and formally trained designers being at about 2,500, the fact of the matter is that the rest of IBM is much, much, much bigger. And so we had to devise a way to get everybody practicing design thinking, even if they weren't formally trained in it, so that the designers at IBM could in fact do their very, very best work. The goal of the designer at IBM is to create great solutions. And the goal of our design thinking program has not been to create designers out of everybody else at IBM, but to give a mind space and a user and human centeredness to everybody at IBM that allows those designers to do their very best work. And we've been written up in a lot of places. This article in the New York Times talked about how at IBM in the past, when we went through these periods of transformation, and we're almost 110 years old now, in the past, all we had to do was kind of change what we worked on. In other words, the actual technology was what had changed. In this modern era, though, it's not just technology that's changing. It's also the pace at which we have to do work, and also the expectation of the experience that we have to deliver in that work. And these 2 new factors are very new. They're very modern, 21st century understandings. We've had to change how we work, And design thinking has been at the heart of that broader change. We've not stopped at just kind of the traditional notions of design thinking. We've actually started thinking about, in this world of AI, where is the human? And how do we make sure that AI is always deployed ethically in the service of the human, as opposed to the AI being the end game? The end game at IBM has always been about helping humans master our environments. And AI is just now a new tool for humans to use. We think that's been lost in a lot of the AI conversations. And so we've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of money. And in fact, it's now available on ibm.com/design/AI. You can get access to all of our work about how we have not only put humans in the center of all of our AI solutions, but we've actually built a framework that we call Team Essentials for AI that fits within the design thinking framework that we've also made available to everybody at ibm.com/design/thinking. And so our whole approach to AI and how we build AI and how we deliver AI is all within the context of design thinking. The other kind of scale factors that we have is we've created an entire design language and design system. And this design language and design system covers literally everything that we do, every interface, every way that IBM shows up in the world, from digital systems to our physical events when we hold them, to the way that we're now showing up online, the way that advertisements work, and even the way that we're building our new buildings. We're currently building an entire new campus in Germany, and the campus itself is laid out within the context of the design system that we've created on the same grid that, for example, our iPhone apps are being built. We've weaved accessibility into the fabric of our design system, and again, into design thinking. Our design thinking team sits literally next to, when we were able to sit together, but within the context of the exact same set of practices, our IBM Accessibility is baked into these practices. And today we have over 92 studios and garages where, again, when we can gather physically together, we gather physically together. After we considered these scale issues, we started working on how do we make sure that people adopt these practices. And we've done a ton of work and research in how the best performing design thinking teams actually do their work. And we've identified that each best performing team has got the right ratio of a certain set of design thinking skills. They're not all created equal. And we've distilled this down into a set of certifications that we have developed education and activation around within IBM. And we found in particular, along with the practitioners of design thinking, we found two particular roles that the best teams have associated with them. The first one is what we've called the advocate. And this is typically an executive, but it is some leader in the organization that is responsible for the design thinking team's output. We've not only identified that the advocates exist, but we've started to identify the advocate's skill set, and further, how to actually create more advocates within an organization so that the teams under them, if you will, or that report to them, are given the freedom to actually use design thinking to its full extent. The second role that we identified, that for years, we spent about 2 years uncovering this role, and for years we called a magic person, we now call a coach. This is not a full-time job. This is just a set of skills that one or more members of a team have. A coach is kind of the person that elevates the on-court performance, if you will, of a team, and also elevates the locker room conversations, if you will, that a team has. And we've identified exactly what kind of skills these coaches have, and we've also identified how to create more coaches. The design thinking coach is the person on the team that's helping the team and helping elevate the team's use of design thinking practices. The design thinking advocate is the person above, if you will, with more power and authority that can create the safe space for design thinking to really happen. And we've created a certification program around all of these skill sets. And then we started thinking about and started to see emerge these packs and gangs of design thinkers. We've codified that into something that's a little more kind of enterprise friendly that we call our design thinking chapters. We now have over 100 design thinking chapters. These are almost organically self-organizing groups of design thinkers, typically led by those coaches that I talked about that are popping up all around the world. And this is how we've scaled design thinking. It's a very local oriented design thinking program. And then finally, after scaling it out with the number of people and making sure that we had the spaces and the system that they perform within, we identified these core attributes of teams and how they would adopt design thinking. We started working on this notion of how do we sustain excellence? How do we keep it in place? And one of the keys to that is what we call our DUX program, or the Design and User Experience program. And we have a rigorous framework that helps teams self-assess and then quarterly and annually get assessed by other DUX experts across the business of how their outcomes, are they actually good? And we have a whole framework around which this design and user experience assessment and activation actually happens. The first is that we evaluate very specific attributes of an offering and to whether it actually works together with the other offerings and other products around it. As most companies are doing today, and most companies are thinking of themselves in some way as a platform business, a business that requires an ecosystem of products and services around their core product and services, we have to make sure and intentionally evaluate whether the offerings work together in that broader ecosystem. Users demand seamless access to services across their clouds, for example. The second thing is, do they work the same? Do we have a consistent way that all of our products and services look and feel and interact? They not only have to work together with adjacent products and services, but there also has to be some consistency, because we've found from our user research that users are demanding that and certainly enjoy products that have this level of not just aesthetic consistency, but actually UX consistency as well. And finally, we evaluate each of our products and services as to whether they work for me. Do they actually work for the end user? Do they let somebody get their job done a little bit faster so that they can go home 15 or 20 minutes earlier, or log off of their Zoom 15 or 20 minutes earlier? We've put together something that we call the journey frame that helps us do this, to evaluate these various offerings and experiences across the breadth of how a user, the context of how a user actually engages with them. As a user is trying to discover something or learn about something or try something. We've embedded a set of design and design thinking professionals at the executive level of our company. All of these people are what we call at IBM distinguished designers. And these are people all across our business that are performing at the top level of the profession. And finally, we've created a culture that allows the freedom of expression that our design thinkers demand. In the upper left is the logo for an internal radio station that is on 24/7 to IBMers only, sourced from all around the world, and anything and everything goes on the radio, from playing music for an hour to interviewing our chairman, Jenny Rometty, for professional tips and mentoring on careers. And it all results in great products. Some of our products are very old. This is actually a product that is over 50 years old, 50 years old. And just recently it won a Red Dot Award for a modern experience that was put together by a design thinking team using our new design language. That's just fantastic. And these awards are now starting to come at scale all across IBM. That's what we've put in place, a human-centered organization at IBM that is based on the principles of what you all are now learning and displaying, design thinking. It's such a simple and elegant concept to think about gaining empathy with users, prototyping possible solutions, understanding problems better, and then iterating over and over and over on those three things. We call that our loop of observing, reflecting, and making, and reflecting and observing, reflecting, making. We go through the loop as many times as possible. We built an entire organization based on design thinking. You all are on the right track. Thank you so much for the time today. And I hope some of this has been useful to at least some of you. Thanks.
Hi, Phil. Thank you so much for this inspiring keynote speech. Thank you very much. So for our students, most of them, the first time that they had this contact with design thinking was through the sugar course. So they had 9 months to learn, like you said, to iterate, to how to empathize with your user, how to prototype, how to test, how to listen. And now that the end of the course is approaching, most of them will move on to start working in companies. So what would be your advice for these young, brilliant minds who has just been exposed to design thinking? What would be your advice for them to bring this new experience and this new knowledge to this new life in the corporate world?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I think it's important for you to capture your project experiences in a really well-designed portfolio. I can't overemphasize, one of the amazing advantages that you have versus non-designers and non-design thinkers is you have an ability to tell a story. And this can't just be reflected in a typical CV or resume. So creating a portfolio about your experiences, and in that portfolio, communicate not only what you did, but more importantly, the process by which you achieved the outcome that your project achieved and the learnings that you had. And so one of the things to do to answer your question is, first of all, you have to get hired. And what I'm telling you now is how to get hired is tell the story of how design thinking not only led to a great outcome, but also led to insights on your part in how teams deliver great outcomes. Businesses are looking for people who can solve problems. And solving a problem is not an intuitive thing. Solving a problem is a rigorous thing. And so to the extent that you can describe the rigor, design thinking, in how you solve problems and how you can do that repeatedly is a fantastic way to differentiate yourself. Then, once you're hired, you've already set the stage for how you work. And my guess is if people are not familiar with design thinking, as a part of that process, they'll be interested in having you bring those skills into their organization or onto their team. So it all starts to me with how you present yourself in the hiring process, and the rest will typically take care of itself.
That was a very good answer. Thank you. We have some questions coming from the chat, from the audience. I'm going to read one question now. So it's a question from Niels. How do you realize remote design thinking as a globally distributed world?
I'm sorry, how do we realize it?
How do you realize remote design thinking as a globally distributed world?
Yeah, so a couple of we've done a lot of research on that over the last 10 weeks, as you can imagine. We found several tactical things. And so we're now doing, all of our client engagements are working in this world. We're using design thinking, and we've adapted these practices to work in this world. There's some things that we've had to change. One of the things that we've found is that we have to check in with our teams more often, and the amount of work that we assess at each check-in, we call them playbacks in our design thinking vernacular. Each of these playbacks are shorter and more focused. So that's just one of the tactical things that we found, is that we have to 2-week sprints, for example, even 1-week sprints oftentimes they're too long, and people need shorter but more frequent check-ins. There are some things that we put in place around the way we practice design thinking, which we call the keys. And again, if you want to go into detail, everyone, you can go to ibm.com/design/thinking. It's free. This isn't a sales pitch. These 3 keys we put in place starting in 2013, because again, as I said at the beginning, our teams have always been dispersed. And so we had to create scaling tactics around design thinking, which has traditionally been practiced by small co-located teams. Our teams have never looked like that. So these 3 things that we call the keys, which are hills, sponsor users, and playbacks, I won't go into the explanation of them. These 3 things have always allowed us to scale design thinking across geographically dispersed teams working in much like this environment every day. So we already had those in place, and I would encourage you to go look at them, and you can see kind of how they align teams who are not physically together, how they make sure that those teams continually share work with each other. It's very artifact driven as opposed to process driven. And then also how we engage with our users more intentionally across a team than just a set of design thinking researchers going off. So I'll leave it there.
Just out of curiosity, did you notice any change in terms of creative work between geographically distributed teams and teams who are located in the same space? Because I've heard from some people that sometimes it's difficult for them to co-create when they are dispersed. Did you see some difference between these scenarios?
Absolutely. It's harder. There's no question. It is more difficult. There are some things that are easier and better. One of the things that we have found is that our introverts are oftentimes becoming a little bit more productive and feel like in the moment, they're a little more equal in this environment as opposed to when they're in a setting with a lot of people. So it's not all negative, but by and large, it is harder to, there is more friction in the co-creation process when we're all apart. But this is the world we live in. And either the world we live in during a pandemic, or for a global enterprise like IBM, the benefits of having multinational teams working on a project are also very great. It's as in any diversity dimension, right? We want to make sure that we have gender and racial diversity. Why do we do that? Because we want to bring those perspectives into the creation process. Well, in the same way, for a global company, we want to make sure that, to take examples, we want to make sure that Africa as a culture is represented in many of our offerings. China as a culture is represented. North America as a culture is represented. So the benefits that we get at IBM, even in standard times, the benefits that we would get from encouraging diversity, even though it creates some friction because of the remoteness of the team, we felt like was worth it and is worth it. So it's like anything, there are trade-offs, but if you're looking for pure speed of innovation, it's harder in a virtual world than when everybody's together.
Very true. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and your observations. Something that I just learned from what you said is that maybe the team composition should be a little bit different when you have geographically distributed teams and teams working in the same space, because if the introverters, they can perform better in geographically distributed teams, then maybe this is something that we can play with the teams, right? That's so interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very much, Phil. I could spend much more time here talking with you. You have a long journey in the area of design thinking and innovation, and I have tons of questions from me and from the audience as well. But we need to move on with the program now. We have the team presentations coming after. So
understand. Danielle, thank you so much for having me, and to all of the folks on the call, good luck with your presentations. Good luck with your sessions for the rest of the conference.
Oh, Phil, can we try something before we go?
Yeah.
So we as Sugar Community, we have a tradition. So our tradition is to scream sugar, everyone together at once. So you lift your arm and then you scream, you shout sugar together with us. Okay. So for the audience, let's do that together with us. So you do from the chat. So get ready with your emojis, get ready with the sugar, write sugar on the chat. And when I count 1, 2, 3, when I get to 3, we all shout together sugar. Ready, Phil?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's do it. 1, 2, 3, sugar!
Sugar!
Very good. Let's have a round of applause to Phil Gilbert. Thank you very much. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the event.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.